Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's time for Top Voice Tuesday. I'm on with Bobby Umar. I'm going to give him a chance to introduce himself and all of his glory and expertise in just a moment. But wanted to say thank you first and foremost for being a couple hours behind a little bit today. We had to make some adjustments, and thank you to Bobby for being flexible. As always, also, if you've missed past episodes, go to my YouTube channel, Michael J. Lopez 9. All the episodes are there, really compiling a pretty cool list of conversations from all the incredible guests. And another reminder that on Fridays, we turn this conversation into a little newsletter. We combine it with insights from my book, Change, which you can see behind me, and provide a few other little tidbits, as well as all the links to Bobby, so you can follow him and keep up with his content. So without further ado, Bobby, what I'm excited about today is last week we talked to Rachel and we talked about vulnerability and authenticity, and the timing is just so great that the conversation today is, what if your story is the strategy? And I think you're uniquely positioned to help us have this conversation. Before we do, please introduce yourself and tell us, how did you get to the top of the Top Voice Mountain?
Well, hey everybody, I'm Bobby. I've been a motivational speaker for 20 years. I've done 1,000 keynote workshops across 4 continents, mostly initially area of soft skill leadership. So I was teaching people about, soft skills. But then I became known as a networking guy. So I wrote a book that was a bestseller on networking. Then I started talking about personal branding. And next thing you know, I did a course on personal branding. Pretty soon I started building digital thought leadership. So I became an influencer on Twitter with 500,000 followers and the blue verified badge. Then I started building on LinkedIn, got the blue top voice badge there with 70,000, then built on Instagram with 40,000. And essentially, started talking about thought leadership, content strategy, digital marketing, things like that. And then now I talk a lot about LinkedIn. I talk about storytelling. I talk about vulnerable storytelling. I talk about how to build your thought leadership, how to get a TEDx talk, and how to leverage that. Because storytelling has been kind of the foundation framework of everything I've done. Your networking, storytelling. Personal brand, that's your story. Thought leadership, storytelling. TEDx talks, storytelling. And so for me, if you're trying to build a business, trying to build a brand, trying to even get anywhere in life, even if you're a career person too, like you're telling stories in the interview. So, that's why it's certainly been a big foundation for that. In terms of how I got the top voice, I have no idea. I'm very, very grateful to have gotten it. It came as a very nice surprise. Because I'm somewhat of a LinkedIn expert too. And so although I don't always push that, I always thought they don't usually give it to us. But when I got the email, I was almost in disbelief. But no, I'm very grateful. I mean, I've been consistently posting on LinkedIn since a friend of mine told me that LinkedIn has changed back in 2017. And, I've done everything: videos, live streams, audio rooms, you name it. So for me, it's been I'm very touched by it. I'm very grateful by it. And so for me, that's all I can really say about that. The truth is, like, everything we have here in our lives, they're all assets, right? So, and we be grateful for those assets, and you can leverage those assets the best you can. But there's no formula to getting a top voice. I just think that you do your best and try to be an expert in your field and be a thought leader, tell those stories, and maybe it could happen. But it's more of a blessing.
It certainly is, and I share your sentiment about the gratitude of being honored to receive the recognition. And we talk about this every week, and most people didn't set out to do this, right? They didn't set out to get this recognition. It just became something that was sort of bestowed upon us through our engagement in the platform. And I think it so ties in nicely to what we're going to talk about today, about this idea of our story. I think so often we set out with an agenda to build a brand, and the brand is tied around who you are. So let's start with this question, and maybe a quick reminder to folks. We'll take some questions. Please put them in the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from. We'll be sure to read those out. So Bobby, I've heard this many times, that why would anyone care about my story? Right? Why would anyone think I'm interesting? Why would anyone think I'm unique? Let's start with that. Why do you think so many people tend to minimize their own uniqueness and their own story, particularly the people you work with? Like, what are they struggling with when they open with this conversation?
I think the general sense is most of us have mindset issues about lots of things from different things that happen in our lives, whether we had emotional pain or financial pain or relationship pain. That moment when, let's say, a parent or sibling tells you to, not say anything, or the moment that a partner says don't say something, or the moment you have an awkward conversation, let's say in junior high, and all of a sudden you stop sharing stuff, and that mindset stuff, hounds us our entire lives. But the truth is, every single one of us has a unique story, has unique things that we can share. And the more you become a seasoned person out there and you get experience, you start to realize that you start to get more confident. You start to realize people are coming to ask you questions, and the stories that are resonating with people, whether they're clients or even just over lunch with their colleagues. So when they tell me that who am I, what. And this is twofold. One is, who am I to share my story on from a content strategy perspective? Who am I to share my story on the TEDx stage? But the truth is, every single one of us has so much unique stories and insights and knowledge that we've gained from our lives. And if we just are willing to share it, particularly ones that are more vulnerable and talk about struggles and something you've learned, then someone out there is going to see it. Someone out there is going to realize, hey, you know what? I believe you. I feel the same way. I'm not alone anymore. It's nice to know someone else has dealt with the same thing. So, one of the hardest parts for most people in this kind of framework is to just start. But if you can just start, that's something. If you can keep going, that's even another thing. And then once you keep going, you start to see, okay, here you start to see the brand. You start to see what is resonating with people. And that's when you can start to really elevate what you're trying to do and amplify that effect and get that message around the world. Whether you're doing a TEDx talk, I've done 5 TEDx talks, and that's been great for my brand. But it could also be just from putting content out there or sharing something. I shared something today. I shared a story about something, and for me, it's a huge game changer to become a good storyteller. And so that's why I always try to encourage people to do it. But mindset is always the foundation of trying to build your thought leadership. If you can manage that and navigate that, it's not going to be perfect, but if you manage that and navigate that, it's, your confidence wins their confidence when you tell the story.
Yeah. I want to talk about, I love that. There's a lot there I want to unpack. You talked about starting. And I think, in my book, I talk about this idea of initiating movement. It's something I heard from a client years ago, but it turns out that the science of motivation, we're very motivated when we start something. And as you mentioned, if you can keep going, right? A lot of times we start things without the feedback from a community that what we're doing is having an impact, right? So how do you help people through that experience? I mean, I remember when I started posting on LinkedIn, you get a few impressions, right? Nothing really happens. You put it out there and then you just sit with it. So how do you help people navigate those early stages of maybe the uncertainty or anxiety of not getting the feedback right away?
Well, the best way is to tell them my story, right? So when I started on Twitter, I did 1 tweet per day. The power of connection rule number 1, listen. Power of connection rule number 2, day 2, smile. And nobody was responding to my tweets, on Twitter. But then by the 17th tweet, someone replied, oh, that's interesting. And, and I started getting engagement. LinkedIn, I started posting regular in 2017. LinkedIn tip number 1, LinkedIn tip number 2. I did a daily tip and nobody listened. But by the 5th one, someone commented. And so that's kind of how it builds. Eventually, if you put stuff out there, people will start to, whether you're on a soapbox people will start to hear you and see you. And next thing you know, you can start to leverage that information to then hone the brand, hone kind of the journey, what you're trying to do. So by telling my story in 2 different examples, I'm able to tell people that, we're able to get them to hear that I've been there, I'm being vulnerable, and now they can share with it. And then after that, we can talk strategy, how to get more views, how to get visibility, how to, because you also still have to work on visibility, you still have to work on, telling better stories, adjusting your content, trying different things. My overall strategy for content, anyways, is 80% on brand, on target. The other 20% is experimental or personal, and I think that goes a long way on any platform.
Yeah, no. And there's a comment in the chat about, people have polarizing feelings about X these days. So some people are active, some people are not. I'm not particularly active. I put a little bit on there, but I think there's also this idea of sort of trying to go viral, and I want to come back to that. But you mentioned something early on about, just the repetition and the consistency. As you were sharing those stories, maybe you started with kind of LinkedIn tips and tricks and, maybe more professionally oriented content. How did you make the shift over into maybe things that were more personal? And when you have someone who's coming to you as a client, what do you tell them in striking that balance between the authentic and maybe the more professional sort of balance there?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the reason why I started telling more stories personally was many years ago on Facebook, for example. I shared the story about my binge eating and how I felt out of control. And I remember typing this up as more of a manifesto for me. And I remember my daughter was in music class. She was like, I forget how old she maybe she was like 4 years old. I was just sitting in the cafe, and I wrote this whole thing about how I felt out of control. I felt I was, really struggling with the binge eating, all that kind of stuff. And I wrote this thing out. I called it "What the F was wrong with me," and I was like, "Do I share this with my friends, a close knit group?" Or I clicked public and I sent it. And then I spent the rest of the day with my kids, going to swimming, ice skating, all that stuff that day. I came home 4 hours later. There were hundreds of comments, likes, private messages. And within a couple of weeks, I got someone who was going to help me with my fitness. I got someone to help me with nutrition. It was really powerful. We started a lot of conversations. And not everybody liked it, but many people did. And so I realized there's something powerful about doing so. Another example was when I've been doing keynotes for a long time. I was doing an event with 3 other speakers, and there was no audience, like 400 people, and we were just talking. And someone asked a question about having dark days, and I said, "Hey, listen, I've had dark days too." And I just talked about the fact that some days you have a whole day where you're home, you do nothing, and all of a sudden it's 4 p.m., you're watching Oprah, and the whole day's gone by, and you're like, "Oh my God, what happened to me?" And I just talked about grace, support, forgiving yourself, and by doing so, that was phenomenal, because you're like, wow, okay, this big speaker's telling me this. The other 3 speakers started sharing their stuff, which they never thought they would do. And then the third one was on LinkedIn. My friend Swish Goswami, who's the one who actually got me doing, TEDx, who got me posting on LinkedIn every day. He said, "Post on LinkedIn every day, Bobby. It's changed." Okay. And then he started his campaign called "Let's Get Honest." And on LinkedIn, I wasn't always as vulnerable as it was on Facebook or other platforms. And next thing you know, he had this campaign called "Let's Get Honest." And so that's when I said, "You're fine." He talked about his mental health challenges. I said, I'm going to talk about binge eating. So I just did. And again, it went viral. And so, certainly there is something to be said about telling those powerful stories and doing that, and then the other thing that happens is that when you do that, someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I relate to this. I feel that. I've been there." And so ever since that happened, I've been really, really good about doing so.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for sharing that, Bobby, and for being vulnerable. We talked about this with Rachel last week, and I recall when Ruth was on a couple weeks ago, we talked about her personal posts, being a female leader in healthcare and some of those challenges. And she kept saying, "It's surprising to me that I get so much more interaction around my personal stories." When you work with folks, Bobby, what do you see as the transition in the individual, and maybe sharing your story over time, right? I have this belief that it's easier to act your way into new ways of thinking than to think your way into new ways of acting. Because I think a lot of times we tell ourselves and talk ourselves out of maybe taking that next step. How do you see the evolution of people that are willing to go on this journey that you support, or your own journey as well? What happens to them in this experience of being more open and honest and vulnerable?
Well, I think the more you tell the story, the more you share the vulnerability, the more you own it, right? So me talking about binge eating and my weight loss challenges, my diabetes, my body image issues, it allows me to own it more, and I'm more empowered. So what happens is the more you tell the story, one of my clients is currently trying to tell a story about infertility challenges that him and his wife had. Great. And he's nervous, but the more he'll talk about it, the easier it gets, right? So because one is you get practice, you start to own it, you get positive feedback from people, and then you know what, I can keep talking about this, it's fine. And so it's really anything is awkward, like the first time you dance with somebody in junior high, it's always awkward. But by the time you get to like your 10th or 15th or 20th dance in high school or college, yeah, you're probably a little more comfortable with it than you were that first time. It's the same with storytelling. The more you do it, the more empowered you get, the more confident you get, the easier it becomes.
There's real science behind what you're describing. I talk about this in my book. There's a region of the brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, which is exclusively dedicated to this subjective experience of doing hard things. And I say subjective because hard is relative, right? Something that may be hard for me might be easy for you and vice versa. And there's sort of levels to this. And it turns out that when you do something that you perceive as hard, that area of your brain gets bigger, more real estate is dedicated to it. Athletes have some of the largest AMCCs. People who live a long time have really large AMCCs. And so I think we've heard for years that there's a philosophical orientation around doing hard things. It turns out the science supports what you're describing, right? Hard things seem less hard in the future. There's a question in the chat I want to get to from Sheila about some of this. And you were talking about going viral, and she had a maybe practical question. What does going viral mean from your perspective, Bobby? And is there a number around that? I know we shifted hard.
No, because look, I mean, I think anything that goes beyond what you had expected based on your network would, to me, be viral, right? So if I have 500 followers on LinkedIn and I have a post that gets 10,000 impressions, that's something that's viral, right? So the story I talked about body image that had 50,000 views, and at the time I had 20,000 followers. So that was, to me, that was more than what I know. Also, what you normally get, my normal impressions are like 1,000 impressions per post. Getting 50,000, that's viral. But then and then there's the one that had, my best one was 3.7 million impressions for something that I talked about. But I think that. But it's to me, as long as if it does more than what you expect and what your normal averages, you can call that viral, or it's getting traction, it's doing better than you thought. The real viral ones, are the ones that go quite high, and that's fine. The truth is, but let's be clear on one thing though, like virality is not the goal. Certainly virality is great for awareness building, which is depending on what you're talking about. But if you're, let's say, business owner, it doesn't necessarily lead to clients. It leads to more trust, likability, and things like that, and awareness building. But posts that are about specifically targeted things, like today, I was posting about my event in Toronto tomorrow. Those ones where you're promoting something you usually don't do as well, and that's fine. That's fine. I tried to put in a vulnerable story there to see what happened, but I think that. But it is a strategy because as part of, I have my own strategy where I do tell vulnerable stories as part of my content strategy. So like there's this philosophy that Gary Vaynerchuk has, which is the jab, 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 right hook, which is basically give value, give value, give value, then ask for business. So I actually have, I don't like to use the jab, 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 right hook or boxing things, but the truth is, yes, I'm giving value 3 times. But then I do 2 other things. One's called a 20-second hug, the other one's called a group hug. So the 20-second hug is a vulnerable story. Because we need those 20-second hugs during those vulnerability pieces. And then the group hug is when I promote my community. So I'll talk about TLB Club, my membership community. I'll talk about my TEDx clients. I'll share the events that I'm doing every week in a newsletter, and I tell people, I tag people, hey, check out these people, they're awesome. So that's what I call a group hug. And then the 6th one would be asking for business. So that's kind of my philosophy in terms of how I put stuff out there.
I like that. I'm gonna ask you a provocative question around that. It's something I've struggled with, so that's why I want to ask it, which is there's a fine line between the jab, 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 hook maybe approach, which is I'm telling you authentic, vulnerable stories, but there's a zinger coming at the end, right? I'm doing it because I'm setting something up. How do you do that in a way that doesn't feel intentionally maybe distracting towards an ask later? Because I think a lot of people are nervous about, are you connecting with me because you're just trying to connect? Or is there something coming that I need to be aware of? Does that make sense?
Sure, but that's kind of how we define authenticity, right? Authenticity is based on what we call genuine intent. right? So what is your genuine intent? Is your genuine intent to get a sale? I mean, look, I'm selling things too. I'm selling my speaking, I'm selling my TEDx program, I'm selling my TLB club. But at the end of the day, I'm selling hope, I'm selling inspiration, I'm trying to help people. And for the most part, if they want to reach out to me and start a conversation, I'm happy to have that conversation. But I'll tell people, hey, check these things out and whatnot. And if you want to learn more, you can DM me. That, and then you encourage them to do that. And there's ways to say things where it doesn't feel like. But again, if you know that you're giving value, there's nothing wrong with asking. There's nothing wrong with asking for business. Nothing wrong with asking for money. Okay, and so that's a whole other mindset thing, right? That comes into play. I mean, I'm not a senior vice president banker with a big salary. So when I post on LinkedIn, I can talk whatever I want. I'm an entrepreneur trying to build my business. Ergo, I have to do this once in a while, and that's fine. But I think for the most part, there are ways to ask stuff. Like, I mean, if you talk about a struggle and ask people, hey, share your struggle, share your story, they may comment or they may engage you in a DM, and that's fine. But you're not necessarily selling right away either. You're trying to build inspiration, build followers, build relationship, build conversations. And that's fine. Sometimes I'm directly saying, hey, go to my event tomorrow. And that's fine. Or at least check it out and let me know what you think. But there's nothing wrong with that either, because again, my genuine intent is my event is something that's going to inspire people, featuring some great speakers and a really powerful documentary about courage and resilience. So yeah, you want to support the arts, please go. So I mean, there's always a way to find that authenticity, because all the people out there who are selling programs or selling stuff, I mean, at the end of the day, those programs are meant to help people. Now, if you're selling something that's a scam, that's a totally different thing. But for the most part, generally most programs that we're putting out there selling it's really about helping people. So in what way are you helping somebody? And frame that in your mind of, oh, how can I help?
I love that. And, I think I know a lot of entrepreneurs that are in this same space struggle with this balance, right? It's okay to ask. We're all here because, business is the engine that drives a lot of these interactions, and acknowledging that is okay. And understanding your value is another important aspect of what you just described. And there's a question from Samantha in the chat that is, what are your thoughts on personal storytelling? And you've been describing this, or does it all go back to brand? And I think what we're talking about is this idea, the point of this conversation. If your personal story is the strategy, then finding creative value-based ways to monetize that, because that's how you continue to fuel the engine to generate the value. There's nothing wrong with that, right? That's really what
Yeah.
you're
So I mean, look, first off, editor-in-chief Daniel Roth of LinkedIn has actually said specifically looking to see more personal stories. That's fine. Number two, in the workplace, like if you look at LinkedIn as a workplace, every single social media platform is considered different parts. So LinkedIn's either a workplace or it's like a business conference that you're going to. Do people tell personal stories about their lives, or the movie they saw, or the restaurant they went to, or something they're struggling with? I had a conversation with my manager in the corporate world about infertility. We had problems, he had problems, and we talked about it. So people talk about stuff personal. It's not always about business, and that's the same on any platform. So I think to me that's fine. The second thing is, like, look, personal storytelling. If I talk about binge eating or diabetes or it doesn't necessarily have to do with my brand about helping people in a TEDx talk or doing corporate training or building their business, but it does align with the brand of being someone who's trustworthy, someone who's human, someone who's heart-centered, someone who's real and authentic and genuine. And so, it does actually relate. It still can relate to the brand.
Yeah.
That said, I think I said before, 80% of your content should be on brand. The other 20%, don't worry about it. Talk about what you want. Like my daughter just did a musical, and I think she's a great singer, and I'll share her post on LinkedIn because I don't care. And why? Because I loved it. I think she's a great singer. And is it on brand? Well, yeah, I guess, because hey, I'm a loving dad, and my values are I love performing arts. I'm a musical theater guy, so you're learning about me as well. So, and that's fine. I don't always think about it as being directly related to my brand. The 80% I do. The other 20% I don't worry about it.
Yeah, and
but
you're
definitely engaged in personal storytelling. It is absolutely a big part of every strategy wherever you are.
I have a question about that, and then we're almost getting to the end. This has been great and just so full
Oh,
of
not too bad.
it goes by quick. Can we overshare? Is there such a thing as oversharing in the art of storytelling around who you are as an individual? Do you run into that? Have you done that? What advice do we have for people who are worried about
Yeah,
oversharing?
sure. I talk about this all the time. Look, what you can share whatever you want, however you want. Just take responsibility for what you share. So you want to be a ranter, take responsibility of that. Not everyone's going to like that. You want to talk about a sensitive issue, take responsibility that people are going to comment and you're going to get haters and trolls, and it's going to be emotionally weighing on you. There's a guy I know who talks about suicide very often, and the first little bit it was like it was really powerful, but after a while I started tuning out because it was the same message over and over again, and I wasn't seeing any difference between it. So that's one thing. So like you can talk about whatever you want. People always say you can't talk about this isn't Facebook or this isn't whatever, but you can post about whatever you want anywhere you want. It doesn't really matter. But you got to take responsibility for it, right? The manner in which you say it and what you say, like that matters. Now that said, there's a thing between what we call what's personal and private, right? So when my kids are little, I would never reveal where their school was. I would never reveal things they were doing. If I'm going through a divorce, I would never mention my wife and talk crap about her. I would just say, hey, I'm going through a divorce. It's really hard. Right. This is what I'm feeling. So there's private, right? Now there's some cases where you can forego that because let's say you're a woman and you have a toxic male boss and you want to call him up, go for it. Empower yourself. Well deserved. I'm a big believer in naming people, name companies, name people, call that stuff out. I'm all for that. So, but again, there's also how you do it, right? And things like that. But I think, for me, like you can do those things. And if you'll either gain or lose the audience for various things. So the person who's talking about real estate all the time on social media, I mean, I don't care about real estate. So, I'm tuning them out. Like even when they're my friends and they subscribe to their newsletters, I'm like, I'm going to subscribe. I don't really care about real estate guys. Sorry.
Right.
So, but I think that to me, that personal versus private. Now, the people who are sharing personal information and doing that, they have to take responsibility for being told off, and it might affect their job. It might affect their brand. It's going to negatively impact them. That's on them. They shouldn't be doing that. But again, if they take responsibility versus, like, oh, I can't believe people are doing this. Well, no, then that's where you're at fault. So personal versus private is important to understand. Take responsibility for what you share, how you share it, and what you talk about, who you talk about. That's important.
I love that. And I think it's a nice segue into a bit of a summary. And, we always have a bonus question that you get, which you don't know about yet. So that's coming. But we've talked about a lot here. And I'd love for you, what are the 3 things you want the audience to really take away about this idea that your story is the strategy, and being personal and opening up a space to get to know you is kind of at the heart of this branding conversation? What are the 3 things you want people to take away?
Well, at the end of the day, we're all trying to build a legacy, a thought leadership brand, and a story of who we are and what we do and how that impact in the world. And all of us have different causes, different beliefs, different things we're trying to do that are important to us. So thought leadership is about doing those things to stand out, to influence, to create conversations, to drive the conversation, to share expertise with the world, whatever area it may be in, to then make that impact and solve problems of the world. So you have to invest in doing and building a thought leadership brand. But also number 2, storytelling is one of the best strategies for lots of things, right? Speaking, TEDx, content strategy, you name it. So that's why, I focus on TEDx, because it's to me, the greatest amplification tool for building a thought leadership brand, to amplify things, because it's both speaking, storytelling, content strategy, relationship building, and everything else. It's very inspiring, motivating, and that's why I think people should do it. So I think that all of you have a story. All of you could do a TEDx talk. All of you, can put great content out there. And then number 3, I would say that the best way to get started. We talked about starting and continuing. Like people start and then people don't continue. The best way to do that is to have coaching and have a community that can help you get there. That's why I run the TLB Club, to help people do that.
Love that. Thank you, Bobby, for that feedback and that pithy summary. It's time for your bonus question, and this was left for you, and I really love it. You've shared a lot already. It's a two-parter. What's the best career decision you've ever made, and what's the worst career decision you've ever made?
The best career decision I ever made was to not go back to corporate and dive into my personal brand, figure out what made sense for me. And when I did that, I found clarity, purpose, and focus. I found my why. I found the people that I serve. And I started a path of speaking, which then turned to coaching. And now I've been able to influence and impact a lot of people. So that was probably the best career decision, not going back to corporate, because there was definitely temptation to do so after I left my last corporate job. I think that's the best career decision I ever made. The worst career decision I ever made. I would say I would go early on. I mean, I went into engineering because I was good at math and physics. But what I didn't do at the time was really understand, what do I care about? I always tell my kids, what problems do you want to solve? What are you passionate about? What are your values? What are your interests? And when you think about those things, then you'll start to forge a path that makes more sense versus just going with what you were good at the time. I didn't think about, that after I graduated from engineering school, I'll be in front of a computer for 10 hours a day doing repetitive, boring work that didn't really align with me. I didn't even think about those things. Right. So, to me, the worst career decision was not taking the time to think about that stuff. Not that I don't regret having done all the different things in my life. I certainly learned from them, but had I known things sooner, I would have probably forged my path a little bit differently. So I think, to me, that was probably the worst decision I ever made, was just following a path based on what I was good at versus what I really, really wanted to do.
I love that. Those are, again, two good, vulnerable, and personal reflections. Bobby, is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with today? Where can they find you in addition to LinkedIn? Anything you'd like to offer up to folks listening today?
Sure. I mean, look, if you want to learn more about what I'm doing in terms of landing TEDx talks, or helping with your business, or helping you stay accountable, or helping you build your content strategy, or become a speaker, reach out to me. I'm everywhere. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on all the platforms, all my websites. I'm actually doing a LinkedIn local Toronto meetup tomorrow night. It's going to be about courage, resilience, and we're hearing from two really amazing speakers telling their vulnerable stories of stuff they've really gone through that are really difficult. And I encourage you all I'll put the link in the comments, but you should all check that out, because I'd love to have more people. We're trying to support this documentary film, and so that's kind of new for me. So I encourage people to check that out. And otherwise, come by. I do lots of stuff. Like I have a weekly Zoom call on Thursdays. You can guys come by and meet me and the guest speaker, and it's all online. And anywhere in the world, you can come by that thing and meet me, meet the speaker. Like, come on by and let's engage.
I love that. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you for your time. Thank you to everyone for tuning in to this week's Top Voice Tuesday. Again, as a reminder, go to the YouTube channel, Michael J. Lopez 9. If you want to watch this episode and past episodes, this will be up there soon. And I've got a newsletter that we drive a lot of great content into. And I just appreciate everyone being a part of this community. I've started this as something new for this year, and it's really lighting me on fire and making me excited as well. And Bobby, we thank you for sharing all your stories and giving such great practical advice about getting started, sharing your story and using that as the central element of your brand strategy. So thank you, everyone. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.